Today's video is for the sewing marathon. All day long you'll be able to watch videos of different sewists sewing up their version of the Eileen pull tote from Sew Majestic. On today's version, I'm making a lot of changes so that this pattern best suits the needs that I have for it. That is one of the coolest things about this pattern, is that it is so versatile. I want to be able to keep this bag in my car for any of those last minute grocery store stops. I didn't want it to be a big structured bag. I want it to be able to be folded easily. What I did was I printed the pattern pieces out at 80%. The materials I'm choosing to use are a little bit different. I'm choosing to make the exterior of this bag out of a towel. If you watched my Frugal Friday video yesterday with these same prints, I immediately knew I wanted to make a matching bag. I knew I had this sewing marathon coming up, and so I thought this is perfect. I actually bought toweling from Jen's Fabrics. With Jen's Fabrics, you can get any print she is running in a towel. For the inside, I'm using this print, which is a PUL. So putting a towel and PUL together may seem kind of crazy, but actually it's kind of perfect for me. First thing is it'll be easy to be washed. Second is that if there's any leaking or anything like that, it's going to help prevent it from making a mess in my car. Because I'm choosing to use those materials, because I don't want this bag to be used for something that's taking up a big space in my car, I'm not adding any interfacing at all. This bag is going to be a very soft, floppy bag. It's going to be able to be folded up. It's going to be able to wash easily. I'm really excited to make this version to fit my needs exactly. I'm going to be using webbing just like the pattern calls for. I did not use as long as webbing as the pattern calls for because I'm making my bag smaller. It didn't need as much. Zipper tape, I'm using zipper tape from Sew Majestic. If you've never bought this black zipper tape, I highly suggest you try it because the teeth on this are not like any other teeth you'll find. It's got a shimmer to it. It's not rainbow. It'll look green, it'll look black, it'll look even purple. It's just so pretty and it's one of my favorites. So I have this because I'm choosing to add a recessed zipper to my version. If I'm using this at the grocery store and say I buy a lot of canned items, I want to be able to zip it up so that the cans don't roll out in the back seat of the car. Because I'm making a recessed zipper, I also cut out these strips for that recessed zipper. I just cut mine 1.5 inches wide and I cut them the same length as the top of the bag. For the recessed zipper, I just folded the ends down, added the zipper pull, and then I'm going to use a piece of vinyl for the zipper tab. I will go through how I'm making this recessed zipper once we get to those steps. I'm going to be adding a woven label from Sewing Blurbs. I'm going to add it whenever I'm adding on the webbing. For the exterior, I decided I didn't want any zipper pockets, but I did want some slip pockets. I took the pattern piece H, which is your slip pocket lining, and I cut out 4 pieces of the PUL. No interfacing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew these together and add a slip pocket on the front and back. For the exterior, I'm using the toweling. I have nothing on it. You can see it's just super soft. I did go ahead and draw the line according to the pattern measurements. You measure from the bottom up, and this is going to be where I'm going to place that slip pocket. For the interior, I'm using this gorgeous PUL. This print is available for pre-order tomorrow with Jen's Fabrics, so nothing on the back of this. It's just the PUL. I am going to go ahead and be adding the slip pocket on the interior as well. I'm skipping the zipper pocket for the interior, but I'm going to do the slip pocket on both sides. The last thing I'm going to add to my bag is going to be this bottom piece here. It's going to fit on top of the bag like this. The pattern calls for you to use vinyl. I know I didn't want to use vinyl because I didn't want this bag to be too structured. I decided to use a water-resistant canvas, so this bag is specifically catered to fit my needs of what I want, and I'm so excited to make it. As soon as I finish, it is going in my car and I get to start using it. So now let's go ahead and start working on the first step with making my Eileen pull tote from Sew Majestic. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on those exterior slip pockets. What I will do is I'll simply place them right sides together And then I'm just going to use the seam allowance given the pattern and sew along the top. PUL is not hard to work with, but it is a little slippery, so I will go ahead and add clips at the top, whereas if it was a cotton canvas or something, I would not. You could see, or hopefully you can see, that it is a little bit shiny on the back. That is that layer of the polyurethane laminate, which gives it the PUL name. Once you have that seam sewn, you're going to go ahead and just open it up and then top stitch. I will go ahead after I top stitch and baste around all the sides just to kind of secure it in place, but that's not necessary. It's just a step I'm going to do. I am rolling my seams, so I'm not seeing the lining from the exterior. I'm just going to be looking at the exterior. If you wanted to take this over to the iron, you could. You could not iron on the plastic side, it would melt it. But you could use a lower setting and then iron from this side. I've done that plenty of times. Definitely would not set the iron on and just leave it there. Just a quick iron across. Here is how my first slip pocket looks. I'm going to repeat those same steps for the other side. I'm going to finish the other pocket off camera, and then when I come back, we will work on attaching this to the exterior. To add the slip pocket to the exterior, go ahead and have your exterior right sides up. Take your slip pocket and place it right sides up so you're looking at the side that you want to see from your exterior. You're going to place that slip pocket on the measurement that is given in the pattern directions. We are going to sew from the top side down, pivot, go across the bottom, and then back up the other side. We don't have to worry about any of the unsewn edges because the webbing will cover the sides and that overlay will cover the bottom. Now that I have this sewn into place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the webbing. I'm going to use the measurements given in the pattern from how far to measure from the side to make the mark for my webbing. I'll take the bottom edge of the webbing and place it on that mark and have it going all the way up to the top. I'm not sewing all the way up to the top. I'm just attaching the webbing to the top of the slip pocket. I will sew on one side 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the webbing, go across and come back down to attach the one side. I will do this same thing on the other side, placing it on that mark and then sewing to the top of the edge of the slip pocket. I'm going to make for sure that I don't get the webbing twisted. If you are wanting to add a woven label, this would be a really cute place to slip it in here. I'm not doing it on this side of the exterior. I'm going to do it on the other side. I will slip in a woven label on that side and just sew over it. The pattern suggests that you add double-sided tape to your webbing to kind of help hold it in place. Once I get to the top of the slip pocket, I'm just going to pivot, sew across the webbing, and then come back down on the other side. If you wanted, you could always sew another row of stitching on your webbing or even add a rivet for extra security. Come back down the other side to attach the other end of the webbing on the mark that I made from the pattern instructions. Make sure I have everything in line at the top. I'm going to sew this side of the webbing the exact same way I sewed this side. This is looking so cute. I love all the bright colors. My webbing is from the Emporium, and I know a lot of people might think all these colors might clash, but I just love all the bright colors. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add that overlay here at the bottom. What I want to do is I want to take this, line it up here at the bottom, and then flip it up so that it is right sides together. The pattern gives you the measurements for how far up you're going to place this, but the pattern also tells you to just draw on a line all along the top of this exterior piece for your sew line. Whenever you're sewing this, it's a little tricky to know your seam allowance because you're not going to be able to use your seam guide because this exterior bottom will be in the way. I am going to go ahead now and backstitch here, sew all the way across the other side and backstitch there as well. Now that I have that sewn, let's go ahead and pull this overlay down, finger pressing it flat. I'm going to start clipping all along here. They should match up decently well. If it's a little off, it's okay. You can always trim that up at the end. So now that I have that pulled down, I'm going to top stitch along this edge and then baste all along these pieces. I do have a little bit to trim up here. It looks as if I just didn't cut properly. Not a big deal. I'll trim that up. Now I have both of my exteriors done. It's time to set these aside, and I'm going to go ahead and start working on the lining. I want to go ahead and start working on the lining now, so I'm going to create the slip pockets for the inside. This is going to be the lining, and this is going to be the exterior for my slip pocket. So I'm just going to place these two pieces right sides together. Like I had mentioned, PUL is a little slippery. I'm definitely going to add clips to the top and bottom. I'm also going to sew this so that the PUL is on the bottom and the waterproof canvas or water resistant canvas is on the top. I feel like I get a better sew that way. I'm going to use the seam allowance given the pattern. I'm going to sew along the top and the bottom. This is going to create a tube, and I'll be able to turn this right sides out through the sides. Now that I have this sewn right sides together, I'm going to turn it through the side pockets. If you wanted to trim down your seam, you could trim it down by half. I'm not going to, so I'm going to turn it right sides out, then just kind of press it flat with my hands. You could take it over the iron, but I'm not going to do that. I have this piece turned right sides out. Here is my exterior. Here is the lining. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to top stitch along the top. The sides will be caught in the side seam, but we will use this bottom to attach it to the bag, so I'm not top stitching the bottom, just along the top. I'm going to do my top stitching just 1/8 of an inch away. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have that lining right sides up. My slip pocket is right sides up. And the pattern tells me how far above this cutout edge or from the bottom edge that you're going to place this slip pocket. It should fit all the way from edge to edge, so I'm just going to clip along these sides to hold it in place. Once you have it placed the way you need to, go ahead and sew down both of the sides and all the way across the bottom. I'm also going to divide this slip pocket. On one of the slip pockets, I'm going to do a division of 3, so the pocket will be in thirds. On the other one, I'm just going to do it halfway down. To make the divisions on this, I always start sewing at the bottom and then go up to the top. I don't like to start sewing at the top and work down in case I get a pucker there at the bottom. Doesn't matter your measurements so much because it's just going to be what you want to put in there. I don't have any specific needs for these pockets. I just thought it would be fun to have them in place. Definitely backstitch when you start and stop. Once you have the slip pocket sewn into place and have it divided the way you want, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over to the back. Since I am doing a recessed zipper, I need to take off part of the top of this lining piece because I'm going to sandwich my recessed zipper in here. That will make sure that there's no raw edges, everything's finished. This is just a very simple, easy way to do a recessed zipper. So I'm just going to take 2 inches off the top, and this will be where the recessed zipper is. So just cutting across here. I don't need to use this right away, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clip this on the top here so I don't get it confused as to which piece it is, and I'm going to pull out those zipper panels for the recessed zipper. So I have 4 of these panels. Like I said, I cut them 1.5 inches wide and the length of my other panels. I drew a line 1 inch away from all of the short edges. I'm simply going to fold this piece to it. I'm going to use my glue stick to secure this in place. If you wanted and your material is one that holds a crease, you could just crease it and let it stay, but mine you can see won't. So I'm going to use a glue stick here. Double-sided tape would work too. I have all of these zipper panels with the short edges folded under. I went ahead and checked it against my lining piece. A lot of people have a really short recessed zipper, which is fine. The gaps on the sides aren't too big of a deal. For me, I didn't want too big of a gap, so I made sure that mine was about exactly the way I like mine. It's not going to be caught in the seam allowance, but it's not a huge gap on each side. Since my pieces are all the same print, I don't really have to worry about being particular with linings or exteriors. But if you are having different prints for yours, make sure you have your lining right sides up. take your zipper piece. I went ahead and put the pull on here, but I didn't have to. I don't need it on just yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the edge of the teeth just about 1/4 of an inch away from that folded edge, and I'm going to baste this in place. This is how that first side looks. I'm going to go ahead and pull out another piece. This would be an exterior if yours looks different. Make sure you match up those two folded edges. So I'll definitely put a clip here just so they don't slip and they stay connected. I'm going to go ahead and clip all down this side as well. But I'm going to make for sure they match up decently on this edge. And this time I'm going to sew with a seam allowance of 1/4 of an inch just to connect these two pieces together. Now that I have them attached, all I will do is pull them wrong sides together, and I'm going to clip all along this raw edge. Now that I have it clipped wrong sides together, I'm going to start with this raw edge here at the bottom, and I'm going to do a basting stitch. Make sure I am keeping the raw edges pulled together while I'm basting all down this side. Once I finish sewing down that long side, I'm going to pivot down. Now I'm going to sew across this short edge. I want to make for sure everything is lined up here because this is going to be a finished edge now. And then I will pivot one more time and sew all down this edge against the zipper. This is going to be a top stitch. I'm going to be careful with making sure it looks good, holding everything flat, going about 1/8 of an inch away. One more time, let's pivot and go down this other short edge just to finish that because this also is a finished edge. Here is how the first side of my recessed zipper looks. I'm going to repeat those same steps to attach the other pieces on this side so that we have a finished recessed zipper. I will not add the zipper tab to the end until I have everything attached. It'll be the last thing I do, basically because I'm not for sure how long I want to keep this zipper just yet. So here is our lining, our recessed zipper, and then that top piece that I cut off from the lining. I have the center marked on the lining piece as well as the centers marked on the zipper panel. Take your zipper panel and lay it right sides up onto your lining piece that's also right sides up. You're looking at the right side of both of these pieces. Match up the center, check to make sure it's centered on both sides, even amount of spacing. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to baste this in place. I'm just going to use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to baste all down this long edge to connect these two pieces. Now that I have the recessed zipper basted into place, I'm going to grab that top piece that I cut off, take it, place it right sides down. So have it orientated the way you want it to look at the end and then flip it down. You shouldn't have to worry too much about the centers because this piece should match from edge to edge without needing to be centered because it's going to be able to be clipped all along that top edge. So I'm going to go ahead and clip this together, right sides together. Now that I have these clipped together, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew with the seam allowance that we've been using already in the pattern. So you might have this lining piece end up being a little bit shorter than your exterior, which isn't too big of a deal. I'm going to check mine after I have it all sewn together to make for sure that they're not too far off. But if you are worried about it, you could sew this with a smaller seam allowance, but I'm not. So I'm going to sew from this edge all the way down to the other side using that seam allowance that I've been using already in this pattern. Once you have that attached, what you're going to do now is you're going to top stitch. You're either going to push this seam allowance down, which would let you top stitch underneath your zipper panel, or you're going to do like I'm going to do, and that's just going to flip this top up. The difference between the top stitching is that one will have the zipper panel being more lifted up. A lot of people call it perky. Or it will be more relaxed or lazy laying, kind of laying down flat. That's the way I prefer. I don't like mine perky. I like mine laying kind of down in there. So for me, I just flip this up. The seam allowance is staying up. And I will be sewing on my top panel versus underneath this zipper panel, and that will allow mine to lay a little bit flatter. It is truly a personal preference. So I'm just top stitching all along here, 1/8 of an inch away. So this is how it looks now. That is how I attach the recessed zipper to the lining. I'm going to do those same steps to attach this edge of that recessed zipper to the other lining panel. I will come back after I have those steps completed. Now it's time to put everything together. The steps that I'm doing for the exterior are the same steps I'm going to do for the lining. I'm going to choose to use the drop-in method to finish up this bag, so I don't need to leave an opening in my lining since I won't be birthing it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 2 exteriors, I'm going to place them right sides together. The pattern tells us that we are going to sew across the bottom here, and then we will open that up and top stitch down both sides of the seam. This is really important if you're using vinyl here. It's not so important on my bag because my materials aren't stiff and I won't have too much of a problem, and my bag's not going to stand up anyway because there's no interfacing. I'm still going to choose to do this method just so you can see how it works, but what I'll do is I'll sew across the bottom with the seam allowance given in the pattern. I'm now going to open this up and have the seam allowance butterflied, so the seam will be opened and we will top stitch down both sides of the seam so that it will lay flat. I will just be top stitching 1/8 of an inch away on both sides. I'll put one hand underneath, have one hand on the top so that I make sure that seam stays open and gets attached down on each side. Once I get to the end here, I can just pivot across and go back down the other side. Sewing across the seams like this will not be really necessary for the lining. You can still do it, but it really doesn't matter too much. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back right sides together, match up the seams, and sew down the sides. Now that you have the sides and the bottom sewn, the next step is to box the corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that middle seam that we butterflied, I'm going to match it directly with the seam on the sides. I'm going to clip in place, and I'm going to butterfly that top seam as well, just so all the bulk is distributed on the sides. I'm now going to flip this over. Here is the sides and the top. I'm going to flatten it down. It's pretty easy with mine because it wants to flatten anyway. And then I'm going to sew straight across here. You really want to have a straight line here so your boxed corner looks really good. That is how the box corner looks. I'm going to repeat that same step to box the other corner on the exterior. Then I'm going to grab the lining and I'm going to do the same thing. So across the bottom, down the sides, box the corners. I'll do those steps off camera just to save some time. Since I'm doing a drop-in lining, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this raw edge and I'm going to fold it down the seam allowance. So if your seam allowance is say 1/2 of an inch, you would fold this down 1/2 of an inch all along here. You could use double-sided tape, you could just use clips, whatever's easiest for you. And I'm going to do the same thing for the lining. Once I have all of it clipped, I'll just drop the lining into the exterior. So I'm going to turn my exterior right sides out, fold down all the raw edges on the exterior. Do the same thing to the lining. I'll come back and show you what it looks like, and then we just sew around it one time. We're done. I am so in love with how this is turning out. It is adorable. It's super cute, and it's going to be perfect to keep in my car in case I just need to run and grab something from the store. It is small enough that it's not going to take up a lot of room, but still can get several things in it. So let's talk about what I have right now. I have folded down this exterior and lining. You can see here's my recessed zipper. Here is that top panel piece. I have everything folded. You can see my interior fits great. It's all the way there in the bottom. No problems with that. I am having a little bit of like gapping here with this, and that is just on the pocket that I did the divided only in half. If you come around here and look at the pocket that I divided in thirds, it fits a lot better. Keep that in mind if you don't want that gapping on yours. Not a big deal though. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew all around the top. Since this bag is so soft, I can easily sew around the exterior like this without any problems. I don't have to flip it again. Super glad for that. So I'm pushing everything to the side, and I am just going to slip this under my foot and go all the way around here. While I'm sewing, I'm going to keep it at about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to be making for sure that my lining is right in line with the exterior, so that going around this one time for this last row of stitching is going to catch everything. Everything looks great. I'm in love with this bag. The last thing I need to do is I need to decide if I'm going to trim up my zipper tape any and how long I want to leave it and add that zipper tab. So I think I do want to trim it down some. I don't need it this long. The longer you have it, the easier it is to open it, but really that's kind of overkill, I think. So I'm going to trim it down and then slip on my zipper tab. Like I said, I just used a piece of vinyl and just folded it over so it's a raw edge there. I am going to slip it on, and then I will just sew that in place and trim up the overhang. I'm just going to sew 1/8 of an inch away from that raw edge of the zipper tab to connect it. I trimmed up the edges of my zipper tab. It's done. Let's close everything up. Here is my adorable version of the Eileen pull tote, shrunken down to 80%, made with toweling on the outside, a PUL slip pocket, water resistant canvas on the bottom, and on the inside I'm using that PUL. This is super cute. It's got plenty of places for me to organize anything I need to keep organized in my car. I added a recessed zipper at the top just to help things stay in there if I did take it in the store and packed it full. It is perfect for me. It turned out better than I thought it would. I really love this. I think it's super cute. In my description, I'm going to have a link for how you can get this pattern from So Majestic. Amber does amazing patterns. She takes the time to write out each step. She has pictures, and she also has a full tutorial for this pattern on her own channel. The toweling and the PUL are both from Jen's Fabrics. It does become available for pre-order on the 15th. I do have a rep code, Beth10, which will take 10% off your order, but also give me 10% back in credit so I can buy other fabrics. The webbing is from the Emporium. The tag is from Sewing Blurbs. Thank you so much for watching another tutorial of mine today. Thank you, Amber, for letting me film this tutorial and just create whatever I wanted with the pattern. Thank you for the other sewists in the sewing marathons for participating, and I hope you're able to watch the other sewists. We always like to come together for a sense of community and just inspire people to say, hey, here's a pattern and here's all the different ways you can adjust it to fit for you and your life. Thanks so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.